Okay. Maybe I got too excited there because I turned away and looked in the garden. That's maybe where you lost
You gotta
me.
look where your inspiration is, right?
Yes. Okay, I'll turn my chair so I don't lose you again.
Welcome to the National Association for Holistic Aromatherapy podcast. I'm your host, Savannah Rose. This week we have on Sharon Falsetto. Sharon is a UK certified aromatherapist, writer, editor, photographer, gardener, and teacher. She has been living in the United States since 2006 and is the founder of Sedona Aromatics, the Garden School. Sharon offers a home study aromatherapy education program, the Linguistics of Aromatics, approved by NAHA. Sharon is both a published author and editor in aromatherapy. She is also an aromatherapy consultant, a custom blend formulator, and an herbal studies student. She works from her garden studio in Sedona, Arizona, where she offers small workshops and retreats on site in her botanical workroom and classroom, surrounded by her one-acre homestead and aromatic gardens. Sharon is the author of Authentic Aromatherapy, the current chief editor of the NAHA Aromatherapy Journal, thank you, and the NAHA Director Coordinator, as well as the NAHA Regional Director for Arizona. So Sharon, how do you find the time?
That's a good question. I don't do all those things every day. I do, a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and they all kind of gel together. So, it's a good variety of things there.
And when you find your passion at that point, it all just becomes fun as opposed to work,
Yes.
right? It all changes. Yeah. And she's mothered to a almost 2-year-old puppy named Harry, so she does stay quite busy.
Yes, a puppy mama. Yeah, he definitely keeps me busy, and he loves the garden as well. He really enjoys it. He's one of those dogs that gets his nose right into it if you're planting a plant, and he's been brought up on aromas since he was 8 weeks old, so he's got a good nose for it as well.
Does you ever turn around and he's like taking a bite out of a plant?
Yeah, you have to watch him because he's more helpful in digging up than planting, which is not conducive to gardening, obviously. But sometimes he likes to sniff, and if you follow me on Instagram, you'll notice there's quite a few photos with Harry's little nose on the flowers because as I go to photograph something, there's his little nose.
All right, Sharon. Well, I guess we'll start here. What brought you into aromatherapy? I know you have a bunch of other things listed, but for the aromatherapy podcast, I thought I'd start here.
Well, into aromatherapy, it all goes back to about 2004 when I lost my first husband suddenly when I was living in England. And I turned to aromatherapy and aromatherapy massage to help me through that grieving process. And I decided it was something I wanted to learn more about and help others with. And that started the entire ball rolling. I enrolled with Penny Price Aromatherapy in England. She's pretty well known aromatherapy provider and teacher. And I completed her clinical diploma, and here we are about 15 years later. That's kind of what brought me into this. And it's been, it came from aromatherapy massage, and I've gone through products and teaching and, all sorts of different things now with it, which has led me to the aromatic garden in a roundabout way.
So 15 years later, and you end up in Sedona, Arizona from England. Did you have any other stops in between?
No, I traveled a lot with my first husband when he was alive. We did a lot of traveling. So I guess coming on vacation to Sedona by myself wasn't a really big deal to me at the time. And yeah, I ended up here in Sedona. Personal situation brought me here, and here I am. Been living in Sedona now since 2006. So yeah, I think I've lived here actually longer than anywhere I've lived in England since I left home.
Wow. And for any listeners who have never been to Sedona, I mean, it is one of those places I traveled to in my childhood that's always stuck with me as absolutely
Wow.
beautiful. And I can imagine that anybody would want to end up there on
Yeah.
accident, on purpose. It is just like beautiful place in Arizona that just surrounded by bright sun and desert,
Yeah.
but also lots of just beauty and color. And I highly
Yeah.
recommend anybody going. And if you do, maybe you can stop by and see Sharon in
Yeah.
her garden and a workshop. So
Yeah.
wrap up a few things into your trip.
Yeah, I live it's really ideal where I live. I can still see the red rocks out the window from here. But I'm actually 5 minutes kind of outside of what I call main tourist Sedona, because everybody wants to visit these days. So it gets a lot of traffic, but I'm kind of tucked away in a little corner,
Oh
just
man,
out
that
on the
does sound like a
outskirts.
dream.
Yes. So yeah, if you need to if you want to come and visit me, well you'll have to let me know because I need to give you the secret directions.
And I guess being in that part of Arizona is probably really helpful for your garden and having, I guess we can start getting into it because I mean, springtime is here. So I'm actually really excited to start and talk to you
Yeah.
about what you're doing in your garden since I'm still hustling together to get ideas for what I'm going to do in this house we just bought with this yard we just
Oh yeah.
inherited. And I'm looking forward to talking to you and seeing kind of what you've got going on in springtime in your garden.
That
Um,
sounds exciting. Yeah. Um, it's it's a challenge. I won't say it's easy trying to garden in Arizona. And everywhere's different, so you'll probably have your own challenges. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the garden zones. I'm in what they call zone 8A. So you kind of have to look for plants that will kind of survive in your area. If you're just dealing with annuals like sunflowers, that's not an issue because they're going to die back anyway. But it's things like perennials that you kind of have to look at the garden zone because they may not overwinter in your area depending on how severe a winter you get. Um, the other thing is the soil. We have really, for want of a better word, yucky soil. Yeah, it's all clay and red, and so I have to add amendments. I used raised garden boxes. That's how I get around it, and lots of pots and as well, because then you can put the good soil in and what the plants need. At this time of the year, I mean, when I talk about an aromatic garden, it's not necessarily all the plants we're familiar with oils, although there is a lot of them. But aromatic garden helps in other ways. You know, everybody loves gardens. They're beautiful, they're colorful, they're therapeutic in their own way. I mean, that's the reason you see them around hospitals and hospices as well, because they promote that healing power. So plants like at this time of year that I have a lot of narcissus. I don't know if you've smelt the aroma of a true narcissus. I'm not talking like the really deep yellow ones that you tend to find in the stores, the more kind of paler colored ones, and they've got this beautiful, really kind of vanilla honeysuckle kind of aroma to it. And that's something that you can't really capture in a bottle. It's just something you have to enjoy in the garden. But there is other plants like Sweet William as well, and Dianthus, which is carnations, and they've got kind of like a really clove scent, spicy scent as well. Some of these you'll find as absolutes, which are used in perfumery, but not so much in true aromatics, and they're very expensive, like rose because it's so difficult to extract from them. So if you want to start it out, well, if you're going to start out with a spring garden, you really want to be planting your bulbs and stuff in the fall. So maybe you need to plan for next year.
I was gonna say, maybe I'm a little too late.
Yeah. Think about in the fall. That's usually when you see them for sale and stuff, and you put them in the fall and they kind of overwinter. And now at this time of year, you've got them all popping up all over the place. But this is a time you can get your seeds in if you're going to sow seeds, or if you're not confident enough with seeds, maybe it's the little seedlings, especially for your herbs. Anybody that's starting out, herbs or herbs, as we say in the US, are really good to start out with because they're really easy to grow and you don't need a lot of space. You can just put them on the kitchen window ledge. So things like basil, marjoram, mint. Although mint tends to get a little wild if you don't kind of contain it. What else is there? The sage, all the regular kind of garden, oregano as well, garden herbs that you familiar with in cooking dishes as well, and we use them in aromatherapy as well. So they're probably the easiest ones to start out with. I know I jumped about a bit all over the place there.
Oh no, that's awesome. So I'm following your train of thought from flowers and herbs. So you have things that you talk about that are not essential oils, or don't end up being essential oils, but are important to the aromatherapy garden. What kind of things? What other kind of things do you have in your garden that you might not see about in essential oils per se, but that are important to you in your garden?
Well, I don't just I call it aromatic garden, but I also love plants for their color. Things like cosmos, really easy to grow annual. They're not aromatic, but there's a plant you can use. And this is something I'm learning about. It's like you could even tincture it or make a flower essence out of it. And I'm not familiar with that yet, but that's where my studying is coming in.
Yeah.
So all those kind of plants can be used in different formats, not necessarily just essential oils or hydrosols. And a lot of plants can be infused in an oil, taking a base vegetable carrier oil and infusing it and putting it in there. Even plants like rosemary and peppermint, you can infuse those into a carrier oil. So even if you haven't got a still or a setup, and to make essential oils is quite a task, and you only get a little smaller amount out. There's other things you can make. You can infuse rosemary and peppermint carrier oils, vegetable oils like your base oil of sunflower, for example. Because making essential oils at home can be quite a task. You need a still, and you're only going to get a little bit out of. Many people kind of make hydrosols, which is easier to make with the waters from the garden. But again, you've got to, you've got to have a still to do that, or make a still to do that. So if you just wanted to start out off simple, you can basically put some of the plants in a carrier oil and infuse them, or start off with a tincture or a flower essence. And as I say, those are the ones I'm learning about how to do. So, but they are pretty easy to do compared to it.
Those infusions sound really, I'm pretty new to all of this in general. So that's why I actually think these podcasts are great for me, because I have a one-on-one learning experience. But so with an infusion, what are the benefits of an infusion?
Well, it infuses into that oil some of the therapeutics benefits of rosemary. Some carrier oils are infused rather than cold pressed. So for example, like calendula is infused. So you basically just put the flowers into the oil, and it pulls out, for want of a better word, the the therapeutic properties. And the same with St. John's wort. That's another one. You have to make sure that there's no moisture though when you put them in, because if you put them in wet, you're going to end up with mold in your oil. So they have to be
So we're
dried out
drying out the
first.
herbs first and
Yes.
going through that. So is this like a topical? Is it a topical like salve or?
Well, you may basically you could put it into a salve. It's basically, are you familiar with like your jojoba oil and sunflower oil? Yeah, it's basically that, but it's got the therapeutic properties of that plant pulled in. It's not the same as an essential oil, and it's not the same as the hydrosol from it, but it's going to pull some of the therapeutic benefits out of the plant. And yes, you can use that oil like you would use like your jojoba oil. You can use it on its own, or
as a carrier oil, right?
Yes, as a carrier oil. I'll put it into a salve. You could put it into a salve or a lotion or a cream, depending on what you want to achieve and what you're going to make. So, but I think it's one of the things I have in one of my workshops. We make an infused oil. We start off the basics of making it, because you have to let it stand in the sun for several weeks. So you kind of have to leave it once you've put it in there, and just keep checking on it and everything before you can use it. And then you'd basically strain off the plant material from the oil, and you discard the plant material and you use the oil. So it's kind of one way of using plants from your garden with that.
That's awesome. I do have some rosemary that I've managed to keep alive for quite some time now. So her and I are going strong together. So actually, that sounds like a really fun way to incorporate it. I've been using pieces here and there in my cooking, but it doesn't always go on every pizza I make for myself, or not in all my dishes need rosemary, but it's been really nice to have. That's just a really nice way I can kind of use some of this more often.
And you don't need a lot. Yeah, you don't need a big bush like you maybe would need a little bit more to make a hydrosol and essential oil. You really just kind of have to push it in whatever size jar you want to use, and it's up to you how big or small you want to make it. And
do you have like a ratio of how much dried plant product versus how much oil?
No, basically, just fill your jar up with the carrier oil, and then cut up your rosemary and make sure you've got kind of no moisture on there, and dry it off. Here, when I did it in my workshop, it was not really an issue because it was so dry. But if you live in a wetter area, you might want to let it dry off first. And when I say dry, some plants can retain moisture, so it might be best to kind of leave it overnight, and just pack it in as much as you can get in there, so that it soaks up as much as it can. And when you leave it to stand in the sun or in the warmth, you may have to keep putting more in, and changing it out, or put a little bit more in. Just basically get as much in there as you can. That's how I do it anyway.
Okay, that's good to know. Well, off that topic, you make infusions and talked about tinctures. Do you actually make your own essential oils ever? Do you have a still that you use for yourself?
I have a still. I do not have made essential oils. I'm trying in my workshops. I do kind of hydrosols because I was trained. I did a workshop with Annie Harmon up in Washington State there, and she's the expert in the hydrosols there. And I did a 3-day workshop with her and learned how to distill hydrosols. I did not go with the intent of, I'm going to come home and get my still. I wanted to go home. I wanted to go with the intent of seeing how the process worked as an aromatherapist. We have our bottles of oils and hydrosols, and you don't always appreciate what goes into going to that bottle. But of course, I got hooked. I came home and I had to buy a still. And so now I'm experimenting with that. It is possible to pull a little bit essential oil off in the distillation, but it's not a lot unless you're going to specifically distill for an essential oil. It's more the hydrosols I'm experimenting with and making those just for my own personal use. And you learn more about the plants and you learn more about the process, and it's basically lifelong learning process.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, have you had times where you like completely failed a batch or done something wrong and you laugh?
Yeah, I'm still pretty new to it. When I do my workshops, I tell people, I'm not teaching you how to distill. If you want to know the logistics on how to distill, and go and learn with someone like Annie, because she's the expert. I'm basically trying to introduce people to, wow, this is a still and this is what the process of it, and just learning together of the process. I mean, that's a lot of people do not have that opportunity unless you've got the still. So just being able to do that together, and yes, mistakes are made, but I mean that's how you learn. Yeah. Along the way, and each one you improve with each one, and you continually learn, because when you harvest a plant at different times, you can come out with different kind of results. And even from I have a lot of juniper trees and cypress trees on my property. Even just taking it from a different part of the property might produce different results. So yeah, it's really fascinating once you get going.
And I asked that too, just in the sense because I will admit, I have been trying to grow my own herbs, and I even failed at mint at one point, where I killed my mint, and everybody's like, mint just grows everywhere. And I'm like, not in my house, it doesn't. But I will say I've revived, and my mint plant she's also doing strong. So I'm getting a little better at it. But I asked that because I think gardening is hard. I don't know if I used to live in a tiny apartment, and now I have a house with a yard, and I've been really interested in trying, but I've killed a lot of plants in the process. And, I've failed a lot of seeds, and I think that, going through that failure has all been a learning process. And the last time I killed my mint, I learned what I did wrong and didn't do it again.
Yeah.
And I think that's the process.
That's true. I mean, yeah, I've failed. I'm like you. I started out in an apartment, and now I've got this. Well, it's an acre of land, but really, there's only most of it is wild. There's just well, it's still quite a large garden area, and yeah. Do I know what I'm doing all the time? No. I mean, you learn as you go. Each year, each season teaches you something different. And yeah, I've had my share of failures and dead plants, and it may be something that you did wrong, and it may be something that you didn't do wrong. I mean, you're at the mercy of the weather a lot of the time, and here in Arizona, that's difficult. I mean, last winter we went through a drought. We didn't get any rain at all, and the garden did not do well. This year in February, we had a huge snowstorm. We got 10 inches of snow, which is a lot for Sedona. It might not be if you live on the East Coast, but this is Arizona. We don't get snowed in with 10 inches of snow, but it's resulted in a beautiful, beautiful spring. The plants are just going crazy with all that moisture. Unfortunately, brings out the weeds as well, but it just bad. Yeah, it looks all natural, and but I've still got to balance it. I'm still starting to water the garden, especially seedlings and seeds. They need watered every day. You've got to be checking on them. It's like little babies. You've got to baby them along, and sometimes you can get them that far, and then you might be at the mercy of insects or
those darn deer. I don't know how much deer you see there, but they're always grabbing at my apple tree and my cherry tree.
You've got to, yeah, deer like certain plants. They think you put out a snack bar for them. So deer, raccoons, whatever's kind of running around in your area as well. So yeah, gardening is hard. There's no easy way about it. But it's very exciting seeing the plants come through when they do come through, and you really got to be passionate about it.
Yes, yes.
To
That's
persevere.
do you do your whole garden yourself, or do you have help, or is this just a one-woman job?
um, it's really a one-woman job. It's difficult because I have fibromyalgia, so I kind of just take it as it goes, one box at a time. I do have a very good neighbor. She's retired, and she helps me with trimming trees and tidying up sometimes. Because I can't do it all. And like I say, the weeds, they're just part of the garden sometimes. And yeah, I've just learned that, a garden is always a work in progress. You see those beautiful gardens that, you go to places and parks and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They have a huge team of gardeners behind them. To keep them going. So I'm never going to achieve that unless I have my own team of gardeners. But it's very healing just to have that space. And yeah, being able to just do whatever I'm going to do. And there's always something else you want to do.
So I was going to ask you about what you use in your garden. I know you said you have weeds now, but do you ever use anything to keep weeds away? And what kind of things do you give your plants? I assume you kind of go with a really natural
Yes.
take on it. So I was kind of getting your take and seeing what I can do.
Yeah. I tend to use one day I'd really like to make my own compost, but I'm not quite at that stage yet. So I just get the really organic stuff that I can find, the really best organic stuff, and kind of feed them with compost manure, I think it's called. It's kind of organic stuff as well. Weeds are a problem because there's no way I'm putting chemicals on them. And I hand pull what I can in the boxes. That's probably the best way to get them out. I have tried some natural remedies, but they haven't really worked. So it's an ongoing process of learning.
Again.
Yes. Yeah. But like you say, I try and do everything organic. And because you notice that with the bees as well. I see lots of bees in my garden, and obviously we've got to help maintain the bees. So I don't want to put anything non-natural. And I have a little dog running around as well. So
right. Yeah.
You don't want to put, if you have a dog as well, you don't want to put stuff on there that's going to make them sick. And the same with kids. If people have kids, you just want to try and keep it as organic as possible.
You mentioned bees. Have you gotten into beekeeping, or are these just the bees that hang out at your place because you've got such a fun house to be at?
I think word got around in the neighborhood. Oh, let's go over there. She's got some good flowers. So yeah, just the bees that kind of hang around. I am quite interested in bees. One of our NAHA writers, Amanda Plunkett, she's a beekeeper, and yeah, she's kind of stirring up my interest into beekeeping. And I think she did a webinar on it earlier this year for NAHA, which was pretty interesting. But that's kind of we think of the traditional beekeeping, which is quite a lot of work. But what we do have here are mason bees, and I am learning mason bees. It is possible to set up little houses for mason bees, and they don't produce honey, but they're very, very good pollinators for the garden. So in a couple of years' time, I'm hoping maybe I can set up something like that. Provide the little houses for them. And then they come and work in my garden. So we both get something out of it.
Yeah, that is so nice.
Yeah.
It's a communal relationship that all of us really share with the bees. That they do so much for us. So
yes. Yeah. And I have birds too. I mean, I also have oh, what they call the hummingbird moths. They're very unusual, but they're good for the garden as well. And I see them buzzing around at dusk around here as well. And of course, the hummingbirds. We have hummingbirds here in Arizona.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So yeah, it's very busy in my garden.
So I gotta ask, since I have my rosemary and I have my mint, what other herbs, if I want to focus on a kind of an herb garden, just because I do think that they might be a little simpler for me and smaller scaled, what other herbs should I really look to start with that are forgiving, I guess, to a black thumb?
Well, I mean, black thumb is kind of a wrong term. I mean, it all comes down to the soil. It's starting off with good dirt, good organic soil. Rosemary and mint. Mint comes back every year, usually. It comes back every year, and I haven't really had a problem with it. That's what I say. You kind of have to contain it in its own pot or one box, so else it does spread. Let's see what else is there. There's oregano. You could try thyme. As well, and there's different species and different kinds of thyme and mint as well. I mean, there's peppermint, spearmint, and if you have difficulty starting off with seed, if you go to your local garden center or even one of these online suppliers, you can get the organic little kind of seedling plants to start off with, which might be easier to start with than the seeds. And as long as you get the organic ones, and put them in the right material, the right soil, you should be okay. They do like sun. Don't overwater them. They all get a bit waterlogged if you overwater them, and they don't like it when it's really cold. So if you're going to get herbs to grow, I mean, you really kind of want to wait till it warms up a little bit for the seedlings. And things like peppermint naturally die back. I don't know if that's what happened to yours. They naturally die back in the winter. You think they're dead, and then they come back again. Maybe that's what happened to yours, or you just...
It was about like 2 weeks after having it, so I was kind of skeptical at first. I think I didn't have it in a pot that drained the water very well, and it had I assume it was root rot, which got it from the bottom of the stem was really brown and thin, and so I've gone back to it was like kind of in an aesthetic looking pot, and I just decided to scrap all that and use clay pots.
Yes.
After reading plenty of gardening blogs, that was the best advice I took. So everything is clay pots now, but I'm happy with it because I've got green plants in my house instead of brown ones, so it's pretty exciting. And I will say it is so rewarding to see them green and healthy and stuff, and it has been rewarding to like take care of something. I mean, I have dogs and I definitely take care of my husband, but something else that definitely needs a different kind of TLC.
Yeah. They do need drainage. Yeah. So sometimes those pots that you buy, they don't provide drainage. Some of those nice looking pots really aren't ideal for plants. But you mentioned clay pots. Sometimes I paint them, paint my own design on the outside.
I should let some of that creative energy flow to that.
Yeah. So if you rather than just having it, looking like a clay pot, although I do like the clay pots, but you can kind of add your own design.
The clay pots are really growing on me. I'm turning my house into a really brownish orange aesthetic.
Yeah. Well, what the plant is the center of the attention. So once it grows well, people are looking at the plant, not the pot. Really.
Exactly. I'm like, look at the green part of it. Isn't this really nice? So you didn't mention earlier, like last year you had a big drought, and this year you got a bunch of snow. So the garden, it's year to year, but I just wondered if you have noticed like any long-term effects from climate change in your garden, or any long-term effects with how your plants and things have adapted or changed or been harder to grow in certain times?
Well, I've only had the garden, I think this will be about the fifth year now. So it's hard to kind of say for definite, but certainly, yeah, it has its challenges. Even, aside from it being Arizona, and I live in northern Arizona. I'm at 4,500 feet. So it's not completely desert, but it's what they call high desert. So it is get very dry in the summer until we get what we call the monsoon season, the rains, kind of in July and August. But even that has been a bit patchy in recent years. So yeah, it is a challenge. And even from one side of the garden to the other, what they call little microclimates within your garden, you move a plant around, it may have been doing perfectly okay over one side, we put it over the other side and it doesn't like that particular place.
Oh,
So
wow.
it doesn't do it, or the soil's different if you have it in the ground, or just it gets the wind differently, or the rain differently, or the sun, the angle of the sun, or whatever. But certainly, I think I'd have to record it in the long time to know whether climate change was a factor in it. But it's certainly something we have to be aware of when growing our plants, because it's a challenge enough as well, with all of that. I mean, with the snow, the challenge was it's broken branches off trees as well, which is pretty unusual here, but it did quite a lot of storm damage. So yeah, it's certainly something to bear in mind.
So I think lastly, and I know we're running out of time here, but lastly, I wanted to kind of ask you about your retreats personally, and also for listeners who want to know more about what you do when we go to Sedona.
Right. I hold a couple of retreats and workshops a year, and I kind of built it around my garden. I have my garden studio where I work from blending and everything, and I converted my old garage into my still room / potting shed now, and it's got space to have workshops in. I do very small workshops. It's usually between 1 and 4 ladies that I do it for, and the retreat, we, as I say, we do a demonstration of the still. I do emphasize that it's not, technical class on learning how to distill, but just we kind of do it all together. And so hopefully you learn more about the process. We do some of the infused oils that I mentioned, and we do some custom blending, and we look at different oils, and then we look at plants in the garden, for example, the mints, and kind of distinguish between the two, and just really getting some hands-on experience with plants and relating them to the essential oils and therapeutic properties and how we use them in aromatherapy. I'm kind of just bringing people back, connecting herbalism and aromatherapy, how it used to be before they kind of split off somewhere back in time, and making that connection again, because I think it's very important that we understand the plants as well as all the chemical properties of the oil and all the technical stuff that is important, but also that connecting with the plant and getting to know the plant, as you know, from caring for the plant, and what all that work that goes into that just to produce that little bit of oil or healing waters that we use. So yeah, I kind of cover all that. My workshops are usually about 2 days, and I also do custom workshops now. So if anybody's got just themselves or a group of 3 or 4 friends that want to come and do something along those lines, I can do that as well. I try and keep it small, simply because I don't want to overwhelm myself and property, and I just think it's a better learning environment to come and do that in. It's something a little bit more unique than sitting in the classroom. So,
Oh yeah. It sounds like a dream retreat. I need to get like a
yeah.
group of friends to
Yes.
do a little
Oh,
visit and tour and stuff. Yeah. And if you want to go to one of Sharon's retreats, you can find it at SedonaAromatics.com. You can search her website and see kind of what she has to offer and all of the things she does. And you can also find her on Instagram. And like I mentioned earlier, she's a photographer, and some of her Instagram shots of her garden are absolutely beautiful. And we can't forget her Instagram shots of her little puppy are so fun to look at. So check her out. It's at Sedona Aromatics as well on Instagram.
yeah. Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
And anything else you want to plug, Sharon? Anything else you want to mention that you're up to, or anything you've got going on coming up? I know she is the editor of our NAHA journal, so you can always, for members, you can always access any of the journals, and for non-members, you can find them on our web store. But she does such a good job and finding stories and presenting them, and the whole team with NAHA, including myself, I'll go ahead and plug me in there. We really do try to go above and beyond for our members in that respect. But with the conference and stuff, Sharon also helps us edit the conference booklets, and she is your liaison for directors as well as the regional director in Arizona. So if you're near her and want to connect and talk aromatherapy, essential oils, or gardening, you guys should give her a shout. And where else can they find you, Sharon? Anywhere else?
Well, I authored my book, Authentic Aromatherapy. That's kind of like a beginner's guide to aromatherapy for anybody that hasn't got that. I do have a Facebook group. So if you search for Sedona Aromatics School and Garden, you'll find me on there, and then just ask to connect, and we'll approve you. And I post similar stuff as Instagram, but sometimes we have different things on there, links and all garden aromatic stuff related on there. I think that's about it. My email is sharon@sedonaaromatics.com, but if you visit the website, you'll see all sorts of things on there. I am open to, as I say, custom workshops, and I do custom consultations and things. So basically just drop me a line and along those lines, and I'll see what I can do.
That sounds so good. And if you do guys want to get in touch with NAHA, you can reach us at naha.org. You can also find us on Facebook at Aromatherapy Community, or on Instagram at Beyond Aromatics. I will also plug our 2020 conference, October 14th through the 17th, post-conference on the 18th. We will have registration opening soon, so mark your calendars, probably sometime in May. But if you're a member or have subscribed to our email list, you'll definitely get a shout when that's around. But also follow us on Facebook and Instagram if you want to stay up to date with everything going on in our aromatherapy community. So thanks everybody for listening, and we'll try to be back next time from, drumroll, Egypt with Ragda Maksud. Super excited. So maybe live from Egypt, live as in live for podcast from Egypt. So join us next time, guys. And thank you so much to Sharon for being out here and taking her time to talk to me today and teach me a little bit, and you guys a little bit, about her garden.